I'm going to go ahead and call to order the September 8th meeting of the WTA Board of Directors. We'll start with a roll call of board members.
Davidson.
Here.
Donovan.
Here.
Hawkinson.
Here.
Huthman.
Here.
Cortez.
Here.
Lilyquist.
Here.
And I believe we have absent Fleetwood, Lautenbach, Sadhu, and Darwin. Thank you.
Okay, hopefully a few more may be joining us. We will now go on to the first item, which is simply citizen communications. Have there been any communications received recently that we haven't been sent, or is there anybody here from the public who wishes to unmute and be recognized?
We've received no written comments.
Okay.
Don't know if there's anybody in the public though.
Nobody appears to be unmuting. So I'm going to go ahead and go on to the first board action item, which is consideration of an employee wellness center contract award. Les, do you want to introduce this or go straight to Vanessa?
We can go straight to Vanessa.
Hey, good morning, everybody. So last session, I gave a really short preview letting you know that this item would be coming your way. I'll just do a quick orientation and then I'm seeing Megan, there you are, to help answer any questions about the process for what we're talking about here. So we're talking about an on-site wellness center for employees. If you recall, we had a pilot project with a company that closed at the end of 2021. So we had a contract for services through 2022. They unilaterally ended that and closed. So we are without services for employees for 2022. And so through the beginning of the year, human resources staff and procurement staff have done some work to evaluate the needs and use of the program that was in place. And then through that investigation found the community transit in Everett has a program that we have an opportunity to piggyback off of. So rather than doing a comprehensive request for proposal process, which is a lengthy process, we explored the opportunity to piggyback off of that contract. So there, the item that you see in your packet explains the work that went into that. So did all the due diligence in assessing whether or not the company that community uses would work for WTA's needs. We found that communities of much larger organizations, so they have a very robust program, but we can pick and choose elements that would work for us. So what you see in front of you is a proposal for the board to approve the piggybacking process beginning 2023 for services. There might be some initial upfront setup costs that we can answer questions about in 2022 with current budget. And it would allow this company called Atlas to begin services in 2023 for our employees, and specifically bringing on an on-site physical therapist. We looked at a combination of different models, including an athletic trainer or an athletic trainer and a physical therapist. But what you see is what we consider to be the best fit to meet the most needs for employees, and that is as similar as possible to the budget we had for the previous program. So the financial impact is shown in the board item. In 2023, the expected financial impact is $212,640. Just for some context, the previous contract we had was about $150,000 with some inflation, not inflation, with some escalating costs per the contract. So it is slightly more expensive, and we found that service model wasn't necessarily there was something out of sync with the cost and the service. So we think this is a fair and reasonable price for the services we're looking to provide. And again, there's some initial upfront costs that we'd see along with the program. Megan, did you want to add anything about the piggybacking process or any of the contracting details that would be helpful for the board?
I'll see if there's any questions.
Sure.
just in case, because we've brought a couple of piggybacked contracts in front of the board before. So I just want to make sure everybody understands the process. If there's any questions, I'm more than willing to answer them.
I have a question.
I got one. So not knowing much about how this works, does this make more sense financially than if people needed physical therapy consults or whatever, than just referring them and covering the costs?
So there's some cost savings with having the on-site folks here. So the original program ideas with the pilot project were to reduce some of the time off and travel time that employees are taking to get to and from. So maybe some hidden costs that aren't as easy to calculate that we see. And the metrics that we set out with the original program were pretty challenging to measure. And so the biggest measure of success that we've seen so far has been employee usage. Under the previous program, there was a metric for about 50% of employees, that was defined as success if 50% of employees uniquely use the program. And we found that that was the best metric, and folks really did use it. Even through COVID, there was a dip, of course, at the beginning, but once we were able to provide services, it was highly utilized. The other metrics were in the reduction of sick leave and the relationship with our workers' comp claims. Those are just not easy to connect dots. Those are far more variable, and there were some changes in leave laws that impacted the usage, and then of course the pandemic. So those were really noisy metrics. Some of the opportunity we see with working with Atlas there, they are very good at analyzing the usage, and we've seen a report from Community Transit on how they measure things. So I think our initial measurement of success would be usage, and then they can help us refine the metrics that we would want to use moving forward. So again, the usage per month, and then overall unique users. And then they talk about, resolved cases and that types of things. So I could dive deeper if that would be helpful, but the
No,
short
that's really helpful.
part to, yeah, okay, great.
Maureen, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, just one other thing I wanted to mention. We've all heard before about what a physical job it is to drive a bus, physically demanding job. And I know that to be true. And then I also know for myself, and I think for most humans, we often have like just little nagging things that we don't take care of. And the fact that we'd have to leave work and in an operator's case, get someone to replace us in the seat when we do that work is a great reason just to put that off. And so I think the other answer to your question, Todd, is that this works on a preventative model, right? So if you feel a little something, you're able to address it in a really, really super simple way that takes, almost nothing from you, no effort from you before it turns into something bigger.
Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, so I had a couple questions. First of all, the first paragraph says not to exceed the $150,000 authority, but I assume that we're approving the bigger amount, and the authority we're approving is up and beyond that 200 and some thousand. Is that correct?
So the way that the board item is written, it's the change order can't be more than 150,000 before we have to bring it to the board, because that exceeds Les's limit. But what we're estimating the annual project cost will be $212,640 for the actual physical therapist, with $20,000 to $30,000 for supplies and equipment.
So that's in the 240 range per year.
Yes.
Okay. And then the second, I guess it was a pilot program. It would be good, hopefully, Vanessa, if after maybe a year or two, to get enough data that you can report back to the board for some hard numbers if this actually is giving some financial benefit. And I guess I see it as probably a good thing to do, and I'll make the motion at this point that we approve the 212 plus startup cost to the full board. Or no, I'll just move that because this is a board meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion before us to approve the motion. Eric?
Yeah, just two quick questions. Do we know from 2021 what the cost per visit was. You know, the 150,000 divided by however many people went. And follow-up question, then the 2023, it's going to have 20 to 30,000. Well, that's for supplies. Did we have a physical therapist in 2021? Or is a physical therapist going to be new to the program? And how often will we have that physical therapist?
Sure, great question. So the model of the former company, they had a physical therapist in not on site, but we had athletic trainers who worked with that physical therapist for direction. There's certain things an athletic trainer can do, and then things that only a physical therapist can do. So we never had someone based out of the Bellingham location, but we did have physical therapists out of their other location, this previous company's location, to come up every couple times a week and provide some services. This new model would have the only staff on site at our location would be a physical therapist. So what that does is it provides a wider range of services that are available every day. And so we looked at having 2 staff. We looked at having, 1 staff in the different levels, but we thought the physical therapist would give us the best range of services. I don't have an answer to your question of the cost per visit for 2021, but I certainly can look at that. And then, so have I answered your question about 2023? What would that look like? Okay.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Okay.
And then just to clarify, our anticipated start date or restart date, let's brand it that way, is first part of January. That's our anticipated start date. This year, like Vanessa had mentioned earlier, using existing budget for this program is kind of when we'll start the standing up of the program again. So equipment purchases, supply purchases.
We already have the physical space that we had set up for the last program. We've kept that. We've used it for a variety of other purposes in the downtime. And then we do have budget from the previous company closing that we can dedicate to those stand-up costs. And there's one more thing I'd say, but I think I lost my train of thought. So I'll see if there's a question that I can address.
I have a comment. As you said, Vanessa, some of the most interesting measures are unfortunately very indirect. I think we anticipated there might be cost savings, there might be reduced claims, reduced L&I, reduced leave, but that's harder to quantify. I think the other goal is simply an employee benefit, that the usage of these kind of medical services is near optimal, that anybody who needs to get these services can get them. And so I see an on-site model as increasing availability. There's a time savings, there's a reduced time away from work, there's a convenience. It's more likely that everyone will get the medical help they need when they need it, which again may translate actually into fewer injuries, less leave, etc. If we can't track the one, the other one seems just as hard to track, right? How do you track optimal usage? Mm-hmm. What do you know is optimal, and how can you measure how far you're falling short from that? So it's like, I really think this is going to benefit our employees and WTA organizationally, and I just have a hard time figuring out how we can measure it. But presumably these are medical needs that employees would already have to satisfy in some other way. It isn't like they're getting physical therapy and they wouldn't have had it before. They would have had to try to get it by some other means with some other provider. So in that sense, it's not like this is a freebie we're giving away. This is something that should have been provided by one way or the other already. Scott.
Eric, I thought had a great metric though, cost per visit over a year. That, that would at least give you a clue that if, 1,000 people used it, it's $250 a visit. It's probably more than 1,000. So it's going to get our costs per visit down, which will show, that's a great metric that Eric had. So I would encourage Vanessa to use or to try to figure that out.
Certainly. Some of the other benefits we see with the Atlas company in particular are just really robust reporting opportunities, and then support in just our holistic wellness program and in our L&I claims processing. So those are, while they weren't in a part of the pilot program, I think there's some other opportunities for us to, after we get things established, to do better refining on those programs. And so, yes, the on-site service is really good. And then there's some administrative support that comes with Atlas that we didn't experience previously that I'm really looking forward to utilizing. So.
Any further discussion? The motion is on the table.
One thing I'll just pass along is, as you know, the recruiting for transit operators is a difficult market, and having benefits for folks where they can get on-site help is always a benefit and a good recruiting tool as well, which is highly important in this market.
Thanks for that, Les. Okay, if there's no further discussion, I think we already have a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. The motion is to authorize the general manager to enter into a 3-year contract with Atlas Injury Prevention Solutions with a 5-year extension authorized or possible and authorized. If there are no objections, I'll consider all motions passed unanimously. Are there any objections to passing the motion? Seeing none, that passes unanimously. Thank you. That was the major board action item on the agenda. Yes.
Mr. Chair, one of the things I heard from that is we'll make sure to come back to the board annually and give an update. So even though there is a, the authorization here to answer those questions, we will come back and provide an update on how we're doing.
Appreciate that, Les. Thank you. Moving on to the consent agenda, 2 items under the consent agenda, the minutes and routine expenditures. Is there a motion?
I'll move.
I'll second it.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda. If there are no objections, we'll consider the motion passed unanimously. Are there any objections? Hearing none, the consent agenda is also approved. We now move on to reports to the board. By the way, this is the new era. Remember, we're now meeting 2 board meetings, and the hope is to keep them short. So far, so good. I think we're going to finish this one in an hour rather than more than an hour. This will give us plenty of time for the 2 reports to the board. The general manager report will come after the first one. Eric will appear to discuss the mission statement update, in particular bullet point 1. Should we go straight to you, Eric?
Up to Les.
Yes, please. Take it away, Eric.
Well, it was great. I didn't know that I was going to have 45 minutes to talk through these things. So this is lovely. I'm kidding. We'll whip through these. The intent of these is really to keep the board up to date with what the agency is doing to meet our goals through our mission bullets. As we all know, mission bullet number 1 is to enhance our community by delivering safe, reliable, efficient, and friendly service. I'm going to do a quick highlight of an element of each of those, and then I do want to spend a little bit more time talking about safety and security around the station. So we'll circle back to that. But starting off with safety, thus far in 2022, we are at a 38% less rate of preventable accidents and incidents for the agency, which is a step in the right direction. I want to recognize that we were able to present and recognize transit operator Mike Ward in the second quarter of this year for 20 years of consecutive safe driving. He received an award from our insurance provider, WISTIP. For that. We also had the opportunity to recognize 49 other operators in Q1 and Q2 for their annual recognition of their safe driving. And we have many more on pace to be recognized throughout the remainder of the year. A couple of different weather-related responses that we do that really occurred during the summer is we have a heat operations plan that we enact when temperatures rise above 80 degrees. That is things like making sure that we have extra water available, the ice is stocked and available for operators and staff to keep up to date with hydration and cooling. We also prioritize our air-conditioned buses. We have a sub-fleet right now of air-conditioned buses. On those days, we prioritize them throughout the service day. We had over 20 days this summer that we were in heat operations, and it was a really successful summer for us in that we didn't have any significant heat related events. We did have a couple situations where we had to relieve an operator to make sure that we got them off the road and cooled down. As you can imagine, spending all day out in a bus, even with air conditioning, it's just hard to keep up in front of those hotter temperatures because you're sitting in a greenhouse. We were able to successfully navigate the summer through the heat, and knock on wood, we're getting through that, although the temperature is looking to get above 80 degrees for the next 3 days. The other aspect of our typically summer weather related responses that we have not had to enact is our wildfire smoke response plan. When the AQI rises above 100, we have a number of strategies that we put in place, not the least of which is to make sure that we are providing and making available N95 masks for all of our staff that are out in those conditions. We have not had to do that, and we're planning on hopefully not having to do that for the rest of the year. Moving on to reliability, I wanted to highlight a couple things that we're doing in that arena. As you all know, the Linden Hop continues to be a really successful pilot program, at least from a ridership standpoint. To that end, we increased our Saturday service and will be increasing our Sunday service to meet some of the additional demand out there. I also want to highlight that our mobility team works with our paratransit passengers to improve access. They go out and they'll meet on site, they'll do what we call access checks and make sure that our operators have all the notes that they need to reliably be able to safely transport paratransit passengers that might have more challenging access locations. That program continues to work, and our team is out and meeting with our passengers on a regular basis. Moving on to efficiency, fixed route ridership numbers were at about 2/3 of pre-pandemic ridership right now, and we're gearing up for college to come back in session in a week and a half, and we anticipate a little bit higher rates this year than we even had last year, as more students through both Western, Whatcom, BTC are returning to in-person classes, and that has a significant impact on our ridership. We're also seeing even a slightly higher return rate of ridership in paratransit. One thing that we're working on around efficiency is kind of gearing our staff back up to meet the returning ridership in paratransit. For two years, we've been hiring and training staff in an environment where there wasn't a lot of paratransit ridership. We were focusing on social distancing and one ride per, and there's some training elements to get us back into a more efficient shared ride path of travel model for our staff and our dispatchers, and ultimately to kind of reinform our passengers about how our system works. Speaking of paratransit, I did want to highlight our CART loaner program. This is a program that was developed out of the paratransit manager's office, and to provide paratransit passengers with carts, shopping carts. You can imagine they're stand-up carts to help them with transporting additional goods, typically from grocery stores, so that they're not trying to carry a whole bunch of bags, or we're putting our operators at risk in carrying a lot of heavy bags. This has proven to be a really successful pilot program. We buy the carts, we loan them out so that passengers get a chance to test it out, see if it works for them. And then they'll return them at such point as they realize, yeah, this is a program, and then they can purchase their own. This has resulted in fewer trips. In one case, we're looking at an individual who are reducing trips from 2.5 or 3 to 1. And it also is a safer way to transport a bunch of goods and services. So that's been a really successful program thus far. Friendly, always trickier to quantify friendly. I happen to think we have the most friendly, best transit operators in the state. But what I think doesn't necessarily matter. But what we have seen is that we do track all of the comments that we receive. Thus far this year, we've received 124 compliments through our comment tracker system. For context, all of last year we had 134. That's not necessarily meaning we're doing better. It just might mean that we've got people that are letting us know that we're doing better. But we do continue to focus on being friendly to all of our passengers and the public. So that was the quick high level. I did want to circle back and talk a little bit more about our system safety and security. I know we've brought these items before the board a number of different times. I'll say the two main challenges that we've been facing, and frankly, these are consistent with the rest of the state, are an increase in challenging passenger behavior, including what we're seeing is drug use on property. And then the second is just the change in the ability of law enforcement to provide support. For us, that manifests through the loss of the Bellingham Police Department contract that we had. But it's also, there's just changes in what police are able to do, and that impacts us. On the passenger behavior, specifically the drug use, as you all know, we did have to shut down our washrooms because there was elevated levels of drug residue and it just an increased use of drugs in our facilities. We are wrapping up the cleaning process now on those. The health department is coming in and is going to test the stations. The hope there is that they clear them to be reopened to the public. And in the middle of the cleaning process, we're working on changes to our facilities that will help us prevent that usage. The primary element of that is a restricted access where individuals will need to ask staff for access to the washrooms. We're also working on more monitoring. We have better cameras that we're putting in around the washrooms, both at BTS and Coronado Station, light timers and smoke alarms. Interestingly enough, the washrooms don't actually have smoke alarms, they have heat alarms. When the heat alarms go off, water goes everywhere. Or what we want to bring in is smoke alarms that just do a tone and alert folks that something's going on, without making everybody soaking wet when they don't need to be. We hope to have all of these in place early fall and be able to reopen the facilities, because the portable washrooms have not been the most ideal solution, although it's been manageable for a temporary. I just want to give huge credit to the facilities team for all their efforts on that. As it relates to sort of this, the second effort that we're looking at, when the Bellingham police contract ended, we brought on a private security company with the hopes that that would kind of meet the needs or fill the gap that Bellingham Police was leaving. And while there were some benefits to having private security, we didn't find that the value outweighed the cost to that. And what we were getting out of them from both how they approach situations, their consistency in presence, and just their overall quality just wasn't there for what we would like to have seen. In that light, we are not renewing the contract with that security company. It is up at the end of this month. And we're looking at an in-house solution to address that using WTA staff, WTA training, WTA oversight, and also a much broader, bigger picture look, and not just looking at the safety and security as it relates to our transit stations, but also being able to be more mobile, out and about, riding buses, and have a bigger presence. Because we realize that there's two real important aspects of safety. The first is frankly just making it safer, but the second is also making it feel safer. And we want to meet both of those goals. And so we'll be having conversations through the budget process around how we're looking at doing that. So I don't want to leave us with that. I do want to end, and these don't fit mission bullets. I just think it's a fun story that 2 weekends ago, we had the state transit rodeo, and we had two operators, our fixed route operator and our paratransit operator, that competed at the state rodeo back in Spokane. They both represented WTA exceptionally well. And our paratransit operator, Jonathan Taylor, he finished second in the state, and he is invited to compete in the national rodeo for the second year running next year in May in Oklahoma City. I'll hold my comments on Oklahoma City as a Sonics fan, but we're excited to be able to send him for that. And he got 8th nationally last year, and I know he's gearing up to improve on that this year. So that's what I have for us.
All right. Two things if I could hop on. Thanks, Eric. That was a very thorough report, and I appreciate that. Just for the board's edification, two things on that. One, on the air-conditioned buses, we do have a contract to retrofit the buses that, not all of them, but most of them that have do not have air conditioning, so that we'll be able to have a full air-conditioned launch next summer. in time for that. Because one of the things, as Eric's mentioned, is while we didn't see the level of temperature, we did see more frequent over 80-degree days, and view that as a increasing trend, not as a one-off over studying the last few years. Then the other thing on the great report on security is Jeff Benson is analyzing the data so that as we talk about these WTA resources, so that we can target them to the most needed areas as we go forward. So there'll be more information coming on that. Just want to highlight that that's being looked at as well.
Eric, you have your hand up? You're muted.
Sorry about that. I've got a question for Eric about the specificities of the Bellingham PD contract we had. Did that end? This is actually a multi-part question. Did that end because we just didn't find them effective, or they couldn't do it anymore? Were they overwhelmed with the day-to-day job? What was going on with that specifically, as well as what has the support from Bellingham PD been for WTA? And the reason I ask that is in my non-city council job, I work in Bellingham, and we have interactions with the Bellingham PD. And you know, the cops are great, but the general direction we're getting where we work is that they're just not that helpful to us. So I wanted to know from Eric and WTA if they were helpful, as well as from Bellingham City Council, if you've gotten any feedback that they're maybe not as helpful as they could be. Because as an organization, do we need to put a little bit of pressure on them to kind of help us out a little more, as a general statement? And that doesn't it's kind of the periphery of what we do at WTA, but if we as an organization with a number of people can pressure them if needed, and if not, then we can just let it go. So I just kind of wanted to open that up, hopefully for a 5-minute conversation.
I'll speak as specifically to the WTA experiences as I'm able on this. So BPD canceled the contract with us primarily due to their staffing challenges in the wake of police reform and the changes that they saw. They lost a lot of staff. They're still having a hard time recruiting, and they're behind on where they would like to be from a staffing standpoint. So that was the primary driver. The secondary driver, though, was the way that they supported us was, I'm going to say more hands-on, but that doesn't necessarily mean hands-on individuals, but just they were able to be more present. They were able to respond to situations, and they were able to remove problem passengers from situations in ways that they now no longer feel capable or able to do. And so they felt that they weren't able to really support us in that way, in the same way that they had been. And so it was those two were the primary driving factors. They have continued to let us know that should we have situations that we need BPD, they will still come and they will respond. I will say anecdotally, we're seeing a little bit less response than we did before. I don't know the reasons for that, if it's a staffing challenge or if it's a nature of the calls challenge. So I know that it's a challenge in the community, and we're adjacent to it and experiencing the same things that I think, Eric, you're experiencing downtown as well.
So if I may, I'd like to reply from the city's perspective. As Mr. Fraser said, we've had staffing challenges. Most law enforcement agencies have had staffing challenges. And so we prioritize patrol and investigation, which means we pulled back on some of the other services. For example, police officers in schools, police officers at WTA, bicycle cops downtown. So a lot of those additional programs have been suspended until staffing levels come back up. Also realize that private security on private property in some ways has more power and leeway because that property is kind of controlled by the owner and they can make requirements upon people's behavior that police cannot. The police are there to enforce the law, not good behavior and good manners. And so in an interesting sense, the police officers have more constraints on them, but when those constraints are removed, when they have probable cause, when there might be criminal activity, then they suddenly are far more powerful than any private security person can be. So do you see what I'm saying there? Paradoxically, they kind of have to take a hands-off approach until it looks like there's actually a law enforcement issue, and then they become far, far more powerful. With regard to the idea of putting pressure on the cops, don't do that. They know exactly what they're doing, and they're observing those limits that they have to follow. It's not their fault that they're following due process and civil rights procedures. It really is, I think, primarily a staffing issue, an issue of presence. And it'd be nice if we could have more benign police officer presence, but right now we don't have the staffing for it. So I wish that the mayor was here because he has, of course, direct operational control of the police department in a way the council does not. I can tell you the city council has always fully funded our police department, but that means we have a bunch of unfilled positions at the moment.
If I may hop in as well, in having discussions with the recently retired chief and the new chief, it's not a want to, it's just they don't have the resources to do it and have to make some tough decisions to prioritize. As Chair Lilliquist indicated, they are a long time from getting to fully staffed and back to where they want to. I think we have good relations with them. It's just they're handcuffed pardon the pun, at this point. So I'm optimistic into the future, but that doesn't solve the problem that we have in the interim. And so as Eric indicated, we've been looking and talking with other agencies on problem, because this is not just a Bellingham, this is across the state issue. And as part of the budget, we're framing a safety and security plan that we'll be talking through with initiatives, have been talking with staff as well as other agencies on that. And that'll be one of the things we talk about in budget. We're still refining that and framing what that would look like, but that will be part of the discussion.
Thank you, Eric, for the presentation. Is there more from you or more questions from the board members?
Nothing more from me.
Les, your turn.
All right. Thank you, sir. So following along on the WISTA state conference that Eric started on that, wanted to give the board an overview of the state conference. I appreciate the board going to two meetings, because this gives us a little more time to have a substantive GM report, as opposed to the last few times where we've had to move through it kind of quick. The WISTA State Conference was last week, as Eric indicated. We had Jonathan Taylor representing us at the rodeo in the paratransit, or body on chassis, as they call it, and Tom Kingsman from the fixed route were both representing us there. It was super fun to see that, and there were friends and family and WTA staff that went over to support our teammates. So that was super fun on that. One of the big takeaways was just being back in person with WTA folks was really fun, and a great opportunity for us to bond as teammates and get to know people outside of just WTA. So that was personally and selfishly one of the best highlights for me. Substantively, I wanted to provide some of the takeaways and themes that came out of the sessions. Probably the biggest theme that came out for me, and talking with others who were there, was the changing expectations for public transportation. That historically, the efficiency has been the main metric. Number of riders, for example, revenue hours, those kinds of things. That's shifting, and we heard from both the federal government and state government about equity, environment, in addition to efficiency. Ridership is still an important metric, but measuring what the demand is and the need, as opposed to ridership for ridership numbers. So that was an important theme and takeaway. From the state level, what the state law is looking at is vulnerable populations and overburdened communities. And the way that was explained is the vulnerable populations are people and overburdened communities are locations. And that's both from environmental and an equity perspective. So that's going to be a metric that the state's going to be looking to us to talk about into the future. One of the other themes throughout the panels and so forth was about targeting investment to get the best community return on investment. So understanding what is the validated community need that is out there, and then how do you best allocate resources creatively and innovatively to satisfy that need. So we are under Tim's leadership